Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of She Plays Games. I'm your host, Lauren, and in today's episode, I'm talking with Michelle Deco. Michelle is a localization editor and coordinator for NIS America. She also writes short stories and is a voice actor for video games and commercials. In this episode, we talk all about how she got into localization and how she manages such an impressive workload. I really hope you enjoy Michelle's story, and if you enjoy what I do, please do consider taking the time to rate my show and subscribe on iTunes. This is episode 12 of She Plays Games. Hey, Michelle, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's such a pleasure to have you on. And congratulations on The Liar Princess and Blind Prince. It's just so great to see all the recognition it's been receiving.
Yeah, thank you. I was really happy just to hear the feedback. So, yeah.
It's such a cute game. Like, I was watching some of the videos on it, and I love the style of it. It's just so cute.
Yeah, it really captures like the fairy tale aesthetics super well. And so just being able to work on it was such an honor, and hearing all like the accolades that it's been getting. It just makes me happy just
I know.
to hear it. So
I know, it's the thing. Like, you just had such a big part of it that you just feel like, oh, that's my baby.
Basically.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's really safe to say that so far you've had like a pretty varied career. I mean, that's even before we get onto video games, like,
right.
'Cause you majored in psychology, right?
Yep.
And before then, like working at University of California as a writer and a project coordinator for the university's professional staff. I mean, what was that like?
I really liked my job. I've always liked writing. And so that position was more of like, I would say it's more of a technical one. So it was like creating like manuals and guidebooks, for the staff, which I really did like. But I think for me, I missed a lot of the creative part of it. So these manuals had like a lot of technical, information primarily for internal staff. And so while I enjoyed doing it, I kind of missed the creative part of it.
Yeah, I guess there's like no changing science, really.
Right, exactly, yeah.
It's just like, oh, I can't actually say anything else about this because that's just what it is.
Right, exactly.
So then how did you manage to go from that to getting a contract role at Square Enix?
Oh gosh. So that one is pretty it's an interesting story. So like I always had an interest in gaming, but kind of early on I was kind of steered away from pursuing games as a career. So, like the classic stereotypes of like, you'll never get a real job, you'll blah, 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 blah. And I listened to that. So I went into another field, which people saw as like, oh, okay, this is, it has more like stability.
Yeah.
So I worked at UCLA for about 2 years, got my master's there. That job was actually a contract too. So that ended. And then I traveled for a bit. I went to China for about 2 weeks, came back, and I was like, okay, I've traveled. I have a job underneath my belt. I'm going to get a job in the next like 3 months. Well, I was applying and applying and applying, and I didn't hear back. So a lot of the feedback I heard was like, you don't have enough experience. I'm just like, but I'm kind of fresh out of grad school.
Oh,
what,
bless you.
Yeah. So that was kind of my life for the next, actually, like I would say 8 months. So I didn't have a job for about 8 months after the contract role ended. And so it came to a point where I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do a career change, now's the time to do it. I'm still fairly early on in my career that making a drastic career change isn't going to really have many consequences. So I decided to apply to game testing. And this is where I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to work in localization, so it's better, to start now and like work my way up. So I got the job at Square Enix, and managed to stay there throughout 3 projects. So, that was kind of like the springboard to working in Loc full time.
Is that the terminology loc?
Yeah, sorry.
That's cool.
I always
like
say
it.
Loc, yeah, because it's localization, but like a lot of us just call it Loc for short. But I'll try to use the full term.
No. I like loc.
Shorthand.
I think it's cool. Loc.
Yeah,
I'm in
yeah.
loc. But
Yeah.
no, I think that's such a common story. One that I hope kind of like with like future generations, it is, because it can be so toxic, that sort of feeling that, oh God, I'm doing something that's against the grain. Like people are going to sort of judge me, or it's like, it's not a real career. Like I fed into that too, like all of us do it, because we're just so scared of, like, I think it's almost like a scared of failure. We don't want to go into something that we think we're going to fail at, or we think is not going to lead to a sort of nice life in the end.
Right, exactly. And I think there's still some of that stigma that's still there. Like even nowadays, when I tell people that like I work in games, like a lot of them are like, oh, that's nice. And it's like,
I know. Like, I swear it's not a fairy tale. It's not like a fairy tale thing. There's
oh goodness, no.
And like, I mean, the fact that you're in localization as well, it like shows that there's so many aspects of game development that you can get in on. Like,
right.
There's so many different things. And I mean, going back onto the creative side, one of the games you got to work on, which is honestly one of my favorite games of all time, was World of Final Fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. That's like the one game where I actually like focused on the character descriptions, on the descriptions of the just everything, the animals.
Oh, yeah.
Did you get to like come up with some of those yourself?
No. So because I was more of a tester, because I was a tester for that project, my role was mostly in terms of like the creative side, was basically like proofing it and providing like maybe suggested edits on things. So there was another team who actually did the translation and the edit. And then once we got the build, then we were testing out the text, to make sure that there weren't any spelling errors, grammar errors, inconsistencies, stuff like that.
Absolutely. I mean, but it still must have been so crazy to work on something that like you were a fan of yourself.
Yeah, when I heard I was being put on the project, I was like, oh my God, yes! I was so excited just for the projects, because it's like there's so many different Final Fantasy characters across all the games. So whenever, like, especially the first time that we were playing through it, seeing which characters came up where, and it was like, oh my gosh, this character's from 8, or oh yeah, this one's from like 10. Like, just to see like all my favorite characters in just like one big game was like, I don't know. I kind of like, I was still testing, but I couldn't help but like, I nerded out a little bit. I was like, oh my gosh, yay, so.
Only a teensy tiny bit.
A little bit, just a tiny bit, yeah.
I don't blame you though. That game is so freaking cute.
Like, it's so adorable, and the soundtrack's great. The gameplay is fun. It's like, it's one of those wholesome games.
It really is. It really is a game that you just want to sit down with a nice cup of coffee and just be like, oh, I want to cuddle you. If you were a person, I'd cuddle the crap out of you.
Yeah.
But I mean, while we are on the subject of Final Fantasy, which one is your favorite? And also, to test a theory, was it your first game that is your favorite?
Oh, interesting. Okay, so my favorite Final Fantasy game is 9. For me, that game is like the epitome of Final Fantasy. I know it's kind of like a love letter to the previous games, but also like the character development in that game is really, really well fleshed out.
Absolutely.
I don't remember if that was the first one I played though. I feel like 7 or 8 might have been the first one I played, but I think 9 was the first one I beat. I still haven't beaten 7, which I am ashamed of.
No, that's okay. Absolutely. I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, some of the games, you know, I got stuck on 7, honestly. The first time I played it, I couldn't get past Hojo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, he was just, he was a bamf. But yeah, I did go back once I got older and found out about the fact that you have to grind in order to beat the games.
Right, yeah.
I replayed it, but yeah, no, like absolutely no judgment. But like 9, I'm right there with you. I think like because it was a love letter and also because it was a later game, it kind of took all the best bits, didn't it, of all the games previously.
Yeah. I think so too. I've played this game like so many times. Like I should know it like the back of my hand. But yeah, like it definitely took like the best of everything, like with all of like the references, but also it still manages to be like it's own game. So it's not just like it's, you know, it's not like a sequel to like another game, but it's like it stands out on its own, you know. It can hold its own.
Absolutely. And as a side note, the on your site you have you singing Song of Prayer from Final Fantasy X.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful.
Thank you.
I was looking at it and I was just like, she has a song on here called Song of Prayer. Is that Final Fantasy X? It is Final Fantasy X. Oh. So yeah, no, that was really, really, it's so pretty.
Thank you. Yeah, like years ago, I tried doing like song covers, and that was when I was like really proud of, because it's so pretty. Like in 10, like all of the Song of Prayer songs, I guess they're really haunting, but they're so beautiful. So I wanted to try my hand at one.
It was really good.
Oh, thank you.
And then I noticed while at Square Enix, I mean, you know, on top of just working on the games, you also were like liaising with Prima Games for the strategy guides, and then also submitting forms for ESRB and putting together promotional trailers for E3. I mean, like just so much stuff. I mean, is this a common misconception that like localization, when you work as in localization, you're like strictly on the game and like nothing else?
So I think it depends based on like the role you have. So like some people in localization, they're, you know, they may just only be doing like the translation and the edit. Some people might just be doing QA, and some might actually just be doing like coordination. So they might be like coordinating QA, doing like ratings and submission. So in my role, at least for the testing role, it was primarily testing, but we also got to do other things that would lead to the game being published. So I did help out, or I did do the ESRB ratings, you know, like E, E10, teen, you know, we do have to get ratings in order for the game to be published at retail. And then for trailers, that was actually, so usually QA are the ones that are the most hands-on with the game. You know, they're playing it from beginning to end. They know the characters. They know, like, basically they know the whole game. And so some other departments, such as marketing, may ask, hey, you know, what are some cool scenes that we'd like to, or, you know, that we should showcase? So it may be, oh, hey, this boss battle is really cool, or like this like dialogue scene. And also, you know, they may also tell them like, hey, you know, maybe we should avoid this for like spoilers. So QA is kind of like, it's like all encompassing. So they have the most knowledge, and so therefore they're one of the best teams that are suited to providing like that information.
That is actually really an interesting point. Yeah, like using the QA, because obviously they've played the game more than anybody else,
right, exactly,
on the planet. Like, you know, asking them for the advice. I didn't realize that it actually did kind of work that way in the sense.
Yeah, I think it depends based on like the team. So like some teams may have like, you know, like specifically like a marketing person who just plays the game and does that for them. But because we were Again, QA was the most like hands-on. We often were asked to provide things such as like the ratings, because we have to submit like the footage or marketing for like suggestions, or even like for like Prima games, I think Prima was asking questions about like story progression or gameplay. And so QA was like the best team that was suited to answer those questions.
And then does that also play into the various differences in roles in the field, as like within your first few contracts, you were a localization tester, writer, and editor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a lot of different titles.
Yeah.
I think so too. I think it largely depends on the company and what like their needs are. So a bigger company might have, a specialist like copy editor, whereas at a different company, you might be both the writer and the editor and also handle testing. So it just really depends on like the company's needs. It can also depend on the size of the project. So if it's a big project, you may only want to have just a couple people focusing on just the translation and the edit. Whereas like if it's a smaller game, then maybe the person who edited it can also do a bit of QA. So it really depends. I don't think there's any fixed role. I think maybe for freelancers, for instance, they may only handle just the translation and the edit, but for people who are in-house, they may do more, which has been actually my experience. I've done more because it's more of an in-house role.
I guess that's the thing. Like it's better probably to be that way, to have so many different hats on. I know in a previous interview, we sort of talked about transitional skills, like transferable skills, that you can transfer to each role that you do. And I'm sure with having those multiple hats, that makes you more of a commodity, either to just the company itself or even to like another company, like the fact that you can do it all essentially.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's like, for me, I've been fortunate to have, the experience where I do wear like a lot of hats. So I've done loc QA, I've done the writing, I've done coordination, I've done functional QA, if we have to check for like major problems. So it's like, I've kind of like a jack of all trades, but I wouldn't say like a master of none, because that's not true.
Yeah, I know. I hate that.
But it's definitely like I've done so many things throughout the process that I have a good idea of like the workflow and what needs to be done at what point.
Yeah, definitely. So with some of your projects, your contribution is referenced within the game's credits, but then for others, certain roles within the localization teams are highlighted. Is this sort of a regular thing within localization, or is this, I don't know, is this something that is common?
I'm not actually too sure. I think because, and it kind of goes back to the previous question where it's like, because we wear so many hats, it's kind of hard to list out like exactly like what we did. So like if I listed out what I did on this game, it could go on for like 2 pages of like credits, because I've done like submission, I've done ratings, I've done QA, I've done,
your name will just be under everything.
Yeah.
Every single one. Just Michelle.
Yeah.
Michelle Deco.
So it's like, it is kind of hard to like, we do so many things that it is kind of hard to list it out. And like, kind of like what I mentioned, in localization, you can be like, even within that field, you can be doing so many like other things, like, again, like writing, editing, translating, coordinating QA, submission, so I think most people, when they think of localization, they will gear, or they may gravitate more towards like, okay, he was like the editor and the writer translator. So more of the creative side, but there are obviously like more divisions within that field too. So it is kind of hard to list out.
Yeah. Yeah. Just submit an Excel sheet of just every single thing I do.
Basically.
There you go.
Yeah.
But you've spent like the majority of your career focused around games being localized from Japanese, and there are some very clear differences between the two languages in terms of like meaning. Having spoken to voice actors in the past, they've often mention like feedback loops with the Japanese teams to make sure that everyone's sort of happy with what was said. Does that happen with the text as well, or do they sort of trust your judgment on that?
So something that's really good to do before you even start to localize a project is to do some sort of like familiarization period. So it's basically you have the text, or you have the Japanese text, and you're working with in my case, with a translator. But before you even actually start to translate and to edit the text, you kind of like, you familiarize yourself with the game. So knowing the characters, maybe how they're speaking, it's basically like establishing things from the get-go so that as you're translating and as you're editing, you don't have to figure those things out at the start. So that would include, maybe talking with the devs about, hey, okay, so that we have this text, maybe are you looking for more of a closer to the original translation? Is there more creative freedom? Is there like a balance? So it's good to establish that from the get-go so that as you're working on it, you don't have to make those decisions like right then and there. So that can include things like terminology, also, how characters talk, that sort of thing.
It can really be an interesting thing between Japanese and English, or any language really, and English, since like so many people compare and contrast the two languages, don't they? Like you have the more like purists who are just like, oh, the Japanese version is the only version and blah, 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 blah.
Right. Yeah. I've heard that.
Yeah.
A lot.
Oh, it's just so intense, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it is. And the thing about it is, translation and localization, they're similar, but they're not the same thing. So when you're doing translating, and I can't exactly speak from a translator's perspective, but from what I know, you are conveying what the Japanese is into straight English. Yeah. But then with localization, you're taking that and you're like, okay, here's what it means in Japanese. Now, how can I adapt that for North American audiences? So
they're like the Google Translate, and then you're like this is what it actually means.
Yeah, exactly. And it is, there are some things like in Japanese that may not translate well into English. So this can include like things like wordplay. Like, I worked on a game that had like, you were in this, I think it was like a dungeon, and you had like, some riddles, but they were based on like Japanese characters, and the amount of characters aren't the same in English. So it basically had to, come up with new ones, because if we had left that in, it wouldn't have made sense. And so English speaking players wouldn't have been able to progress. And so that's like a case where it does, like, that's where the localization part comes in. Like, it also includes things like, is the player going to get stuck if they come across this?
Yeah. And like signs and stuff as well, like things that are actually in the environment, I guess, as well, that the player needs to sort of know and understand. I remember I had an interesting time when I was playing Shenmue recently, because I had to try and find the house name of someone, and I just was like not even really paying attention to like the bottom of the screen where it had the translation of the characters above. I was just paying attention to the characters, and I was just kind of like,
I see, yeah,
okay, that kind of that looks like what it should be, maybe.
Right.
I'm totally guessing. But it's like, yeah, like your role is so vitally important to us, essentially, English speakers and that type of thing, at least for what we are, essentially. But yeah, I mean, localization has come a long way from where it's been. But what do you think are areas where improvements can continue to be made? I remember reading an interview where Richard Honeywood, who you've worked with, right?
Yep. Yeah. On my very first project.
Yeah. He's the senior localization director at Square Enix. And he spoke about how they switched from localization happening often as an afterthought to live translation, where the Japanese and English teams both like worked together at the same time, which meant real-time feedback was possible, and both teams could work together to name things like characters. And so just so that they would work well with both languages from the start. Is that like a utopia? Is that like a massive pipe dream, or is the industry, you think, working towards this?
I think there's definitely a shift toward prioritizing the localization process. I think back then, like maybe in the 80s and like early 90s, it wasn't really important just because like a lot of games didn't have a lot of text, and B, a lot of these games were more about like the gameplay. But as we've seen in even like the past like 10, 20 years, these games that require a localization are huge games. They're huge narrative games, they've got millions of characters, like the size of books. And so, you are going to have players who are going to be a little bit more, they'll be like, we do want a great quality translation and a great quality localization. So there's definitely that shift of like prioritizing good work. I think one of the drawbacks is that, a lot of times, games are on a schedule. And so, we'll need a game that needs to be out by X date. And so therefore we only get X amount of weeks or months to work on the localization. So sometimes we, freelancers and in-house people get like a lot of time, and sometimes they don't. And so it's kind of like a half and half thing, where it's like, if you do get time to work on these projects, then obviously the quality is going to be better. But if you don't, then, it might suffer. And so I think there's definitely a shift toward, we do want to prioritize the quality of this game, because it's so integral to it. It's so integral to the user experience.
Oh my gosh, completely. I mean, going back to play the original Resident Evil, it's very interesting.
Oh.
Like some of the voice acting specifically, like it shows how important it is that like
Right.
we do have people in place to make it sound more coherent. Because obviously when the original writer made it, they just intended it to sound the way that their native language said it. And so coming over to America, I think that, yeah, in the past, they really kind of, they didn't put as much care as it needed, whether it was money related, whether it was just not really understanding what the necessity for it. So no, I mean, I'm also fascinated by the fact that like there's a lot of games developers now who are from primarily non-English speaking countries. I mean, you have like, even within Square Enix, the ones who made Life is Strange, they're French, and like CD Projekt Red, who are obviously, they're Polish.
Right.
So I really do feel like people in your role are really becoming integral to games in general, because these are people who want to tell their stories and share it with the masses. And the only thing that maybe, well, this aside from actually making the game,
Right.
is the connection of language. And yeah, it's really awesome what you guys do.
Yeah, exactly. And actually going off of that too, I think another thing, kind of going back to the areas of improvement too, with these different developers, we are seeing a lot of like a movement of globalization. So like there's more interest in games and gaming, and there you have more players who want these games to be localized, into their native languages. So from English to, say another language that's not like FIGS, which is French, Italian, German, Spanish, so there's definitely like that movement. And with how many games we have, on different platforms, on PC, on smartphones, on computers, tablets, wherever, there's been a lot more demand to see these projects and these games translated. And so I think there's definitely, that's an ongoing conversation in terms of like, we have more players around the world who want these games in their home language too.
It's always so cool to see the differences between localizations of like even just movies. Like I was watching the one on Zootopia recently, and like, to have that level of detail also in games would be incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And given the amount of variety you've experienced in terms of what it is you might be localizing, like, how do you manage to just keep on top of the different aspects of your job?
I have no idea.
With a hope and a dream.
Yeah, something like that. No, I mean, for me, it's like I've always been good at organization and structure, almost to a fault, but not really. But because I have, in my day to day, in any role that I'm in, I always have so many things that are happening. And with so many deadlines. Prioritization, and where you are in like the workflow is, does this translation and the edit have to be done by X date? When do we have to get submission in by? Those kinds of things. And so really having a good idea of the workflow, where you are, scheduling, calendars, planners, it just to stay on top of it, because, there's so much that goes on, especially if you're not just doing the translation and the edit. If you're doing also like, coordination work, like there's so much that has to be done. And so it's really, mastering what the workflow is, knowing what your role is at any time, because that will change, based on where you are in the project.
So since you were doing a lot of like different contracts sort of in the beginning, were you finding that you had to sort of adapt your workflow to the company, or were they quite like okay with whatever works for you?
Oh, I think it's definitely adapting to the, because I think every company has like a different process and a different way of doing things. And even that changes depending on like the project, like, say, what kinds of files you receive, how, in QA, how the developers would like the text fixed, for instance, like, that changes. It's definitely important to be adaptable and to be flexible, because as we know, things may not always go, according to plan. So you have to be able to, be flexible when things don't always go, work out right. That's been like the biggest thing I've had to learn, because I'm like, again, I'm like so organized and so structured. So when, there's like, this thing changes, it's being able to kind of work with that and then figuring out how to solve that, this new challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, that's the thing. You can always sort of prepare for the worst, but you never know what that worst is going to be ever. Like, right. You can always prepare for it and think that you have everything sorted, but then like it happens and you're just like, sorry, what? Like, why did that happen?
Yeah. I mean, and again, like it happens, it's like, it's really any field in the entertainment sector, things are always changing, but the thing is, processes are also improving. So you find ways to do your job better, basically, more efficiently. So, it's like, it's always changing, but I think it's changing for the better too, as we learn, what went well in this project, what we could have done better, and then using that for the next project.
Do you feel like your organization and how you've sort of adapted from thing to thing has helped you manage all of your like extracurricular activities? Because I mean, not only are you in school doing copy editing and creative writing classes, but then you're also a voice actress, you're a singer, and also like a contributor to various publications, like you were doing Gamma Sutra and Medium and stuff. Like, how do you keep it all together?
Again, I have no idea. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I think it's like, at work, because there's so many things that we have to manage and to prioritize. I think that kind of naturally just bleeds into my personal life. So it's like, I'd like to publish this this article by this date. Oh, I have a voiceover audition. It has to be done by Monday at 10 a.m. So scheduling time like in blocks, to record and to edit and to send, or I'll schedule like, hey, I'd like to do this thing, on Saturday. So I think it just kind of like, it naturally kind of comes into my life where it's like managing so many different smaller tasks, but being able to break them up. I think for me, the biggest thing that's helped is to break things down into smaller tasks. So, if I have to, I don't know, let's say I'd like to publish a short story. Okay, let me set aside, 2 hours to write it, come back to it 2 weeks, after, take a good look at it, review, edit, send, so it's just, it helps to break things down, which I've also done in my current job. It's just breaking the bigger tasks into smaller chunks. It's kind of like creating like a checklist, to be like, okay, I did this, now what's next, and instead of just kind of like, you see this huge task and it's like, where do I start?
Yeah.
So it helps to kind of break things down into chunks like that.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, yeah, thank you just so much, Michelle, for coming on. And
no, thank you for having me. It was fun.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad. And I'm like, honestly, I can't wait to see what you do in the future.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I think this year is going to be a really good year.
I hope so. Please, 2020.
Yeah. New decade, new year, new everything. So yeah.
That's it for this episode of She Plays Games. If you'd like to learn more about Michelle, you can follow her on Twitter at Michelle_Deco. Also, if you want more episodes of She Plays Games, please be sure to subscribe and follow me on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube by searching She Plays Games, and on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at She Plays Podcast. If you want to be on the show or want to nominate someone to come on the show, you can email me at sheplayspodcast@gmail.com. See you all next time on She Plays Games.